Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us for this session of the Aspire series. This session will be focused on the surgery scheduling system. This is a much anticipated session. S3 has a lot of interest, and it will only gain more interest as the surgical services service line begins to roll out and place more emphasis on the data coming out of S3. So thank you to Mr. Howard Dady for presenting this overview, and for Major Welder for presenting the introduction to the surgical services service line that he'll present later on in this presentation. A couple administrative notes as we get started. First, please sign in on the attendance roster with your email address and your location. That's the first thing. Second, all the files that Major Welder is going to present are available for download to your computer in the file share pod. The fourth file in the file share pod is a PDF file that's a certificate of attendance. You can complete that certificate, and then when you're completing that certificate, there's a button in the top right corner to submit it that allows us to know that you completed this training and allows you to have documentation that you completed this training as well. And that's available for people who take this training now or take it asynchronously later. You can also sign in. Please do sign into the attendance roster on the left-hand side of the screen. There is another pod that I'd like you to use, which is the Q&A pod, and that helps us organize all the questions you have. So as you have questions, you may enter them into the Q&A pod, and we will answer them in time as the presenters and the subject matter experts are available to answer them. We can also collect those and make them available after the session is over. With that, those are all the administrative notes that I have. Thank you again for attending. First up is Major Welder to present us with an overview of the surgical.
Good morning, good afternoon, maybe good evening, depending where you're dialing in from. I'm Major Matthew Welder. I'm the Surgical Services Service Director at OTSG. And today we're going to discuss primarily the surgery scheduling system. But the first few minutes I want to just give you a quick overview of the service line and give you kind of an understanding of how that's going to roll out, when it's going to roll out, what the new metrics are going to look like. Then we'll go into Mr. Dady, who will present S3, and he will give you a basic understanding of the application and the reports in S3. And then I'll wrap it up with some practical applications of how you use the data to manage your specific operating rooms. And this session will specifically focus on service block time. So as you look at the slides, this is a brief overview. And to give you the history, in May, Major General Line stood up a surgical services tiger team. This followed the radar brief where the MTFs and RMCs reported their surgical data. After that meeting, Colonel Tommy Brown took off with a tiger team, and we decided to meet with every MTF across the enterprise. Really, the intent of that meeting was to gather information, your successes, your challenges, really what the end user felt that a surgical service line needs to be successful at the MTF level. What we did with that information is we compiled commonalities and patterns of recommendations, and the TSG appointed me to be the Director of Surgical Service Line, and I took that information provided by Colonel Brown, and we started developing annexes that specifically address the needs of the MTFs. Simultaneously, we developed metrics that actually painted the picture of surgical services. So before I get into that, on this slide here, you'll see these are the Surgeon General's priorities, and it's combat casualty care, and then the ready and deployable medical force, readiness of the force, and the health of the soldier, beneficiaries, family, retirees. And as you can see, in surgical services, we absolutely play a role in all four of those categories. The service line concept is stood up. The surgical service line stood up 1 November as the Tiger team was winding down. And the service line concept is out of Patient Care Integration G357, and Surgical Services is the operating company. You'll see the value stream, and you'll see how the values are measured. So specifically in Surgical Services, we'll be measuring productivity, efficiency, financial optimization, and quality. These will give you some definitions that you can look back and review. And this is the mission and vision statement, which is basically we're going to address the MedCom's needs and really your needs by developing, implementing, evaluating, and sustaining a surgical services model that maximizes safe, productive, efficient, and financially sustainable delivery of care, which increases access to quality care for all of our beneficiaries. Now, this is the magnitude of the surgical services. So our services across 25 MTFs cost Army Medicine $1 billion. Of that $1 billion, we have 1.1 million surgical clinic visits that yields about 93,000 surgeries annually. When we look at a return on investment metric, our return on investment currently, how we do business, is about $700 million with a $300 million annual loss to MedCom. So this is the model that we developed, and to take you through it quickly, the foundation of the model is patient population. Everything is predetermined by the geographical patient population of your facility and how those patients access the system. Now, when they access the system, there's going to be a capacity and capability that you can provide at your MTF. If you do not have the capacity and capability and that results in purchase care, that's acceptable purchase care. But if it's within the capacity and capability of your MTF and it leaks to the network, that's actually the recapture potential, and that is the area that we need to focus on for recapture, which is one of our metrics. Now, if you get into the surgical service line, so we have the capacity capability, you'll see the upper left three metrics. Or three areas, 6 metrics: productivity, measuring workload, caseload; OR performance, turnover time, surgical return on investment, and recapture rate. I'm not going to use this time to go into the specifics as we roll out the implementation manual. There will be a metric guide that clearly articulates the mathematical equations behind all of those metrics. What I will tell you is the brief overview, which, if you look at this screen, this is where we currently stand. And in productivity, workload is really the surgeon productivity within each facility, where caseload is the number of cases divided by the number of staffed operating rooms at each MTF. So you'll be able to look at the metrics reported in SMS and see exactly where you lie against these metrics. Now, you can see the national average for facilities our size is about 972. That's cases per OR per year, and the Army's averaging about 572. Now, under efficiency, you all are used to the operating room utilization. That is going away. And we're actually going to look at OR performance. And I just want to spend a minute on this because it's important and it's tethered to the IRIS. So OR performance is casting a 24-hour net, no matter how you code it, whether it's urgent, semi-urgent, TSA. All of those cases that's plugged into S3 will generate patient in room minutes when they're in the operating room. And we will be casting a 24-hour net, and for this metric, we will be embedding that 24-hour capture of patient and room minutes into an 8-hour normal business day for all facilities. Now, I'm going to say this, I repeat, the IRIS is a little bit different. If you're a MedSyn, that gets pushed into a 10-hour day. If you're a MedAct, that gets pushed into an 8-hour day. But for surgical service line, we're pushing everything into an 8-hour day. So if there's questions on that later, I can entertain it, but there is a difference between the service line and IRIS, and that difference, I'll repeat, is the IRIS metric. MedSyn's 24 hours worth of workload goes into a 10-hour normal business day, MedAct's 8-hour business day. Turnover times, that's unchanged. That's exactly how you're used to it now with a 25-minute goal. And then we have financial optimization. So this is really looking at surgical return on investment. And what this means is if we invest $1 of cost into your surgical services, what do you generate with that $1 of surgical product? And that measure is as well in SMS. And you will be able to see at your facilities what your return on investment is. And the last is recapture rate. And that is the number of cases at your facility that's leaked into the network that is within the capacity and capability. And so I repeat that this is not the total leakage from the facility, because some is expected leakage. This is actually within your capacity capability, and that's based on an 80% OR performance. Now I just want to go down and explain a little bit here. We are not only giving you numbers, but we're developing graphics to help it make sense. And this is an example, a real example of OR performance. And what generates this utilization here is patient in-room minutes by the half hour. And this is over the staffed OR room. So this facility has 12 rooms starting at 0700. And it goes until about 1700, where they go down to 2 rooms and then back down to 1 for the remainder of the evening until the next morning. Now what this shows is the red hash mark is the area of OR resource underutilization. Now we're very well aware that some of this portion of the red is turnover times, and for that will be offset in a weighted and scaled based on the turnover time metric. But this will just give you a visual graphic of what you're paying for and then what's being done in that squared off period of time that you're paying. Now what this is just kind of a visual overview of where we're at, where we're going, what's going to optimize us. And all of these areas here are really just a bunch of annexes. We have 34 annexes that are directly tethered to the metrics. So let me explain. Our metrics are 3 categories: productivity, efficiency, financial optimization. Under each one of these categories that'll be in the implementation and operations manual that you will each receive, you will be able to say that low acuity fast track OR rooms fall under the productivity category. Now, know that some of these bleed over into the other categories, and we'll identify that based on large and small icons. And then you'll be able to see efficiency and all the metrics that fall in, or all the annexes that fall into efficiency, and you'll be able to see financial optimization. So why this is important is, as you look at your metrics on SMS, Strategic Management System, you can Google it and search for surgical services, and that will be able to lead you right into the numbers. And we're currently building it, so if you don't see your numbers, it's not that you are forgotten, it's just we're actively engaging that system right now. As you look at your numbers, you may be really high in productivity, and you may be lacking in efficiency and financial optimization. Well, your leaders at your MTFs will be able to go to the implementation operations manual, and you will be able to look under those categories and determine where you need to work your efforts in order to enhance your facility. So I'm going to stop there. The next section is going to be S3, and this is really going to be an overview, and why this is important is 3 of our metrics will be pulling data directly out of S3. The S3 platform and service block time is an important venue for the management of your operating room. And so I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Howard Dady. He's going to give us an overview, and then when he is finished, I will come back and we'll talk about specifically service block time and how that's going to look and the tools that we are So, Mr. Dady, it's all you.
Greetings all. Can you hear me now? Okay, sorry about that. Had the speaker on mute, so we'll jump back to the beginning again. Okay, this is the surgery scheduling system. As a person working out in direct patient care mode, we would be interested in looking at QuickBook. What QuickBook gives us is a weekly view of the OR schedule for the surgical service that we're working for. By clicking on the back arrows and front arrows, we can move forward a week at a time, and we can locate then an empty room that we can then schedule a case into or request a case. By clicking on New, it then opens up the enter a new case request in S3. So by popping back to the main menu, I'm just going to go directly into the new so that I have a larger screen to work with. In here, we would then enter patient name. We have a lookup from CHCS. I locate the patient that we're going to perform our surgery on, pull them up, identify which mission they have. It will automatically default to the surgical service that we work with that's in the system as our primary. Click Next. Here then we can then select the procedure that's being done and select the surgeon who is performing the case. If I am the responsible or the attending surgeon and I'm scheduling this myself, so I've got the patient sitting in my office and I'm on the computer looking for a day to do this patient's surgery, then my name would automatically fill in as a responsible staff surgeon. I wouldn't have to do that. Primary surgeon, surgeon who's doing the cutting, assisting surgeons, anyone who's assisting. If the responsible staff is also the primary surgeon, no further action needs to be taken. We can then just click Next to move on to the next screen. On the next screen, we would then identify if an ICD-9 code needs to be added or a CPT code needs to be added. Usually, if the ICD-9 codes or CPT codes have been associated to the case, they'll automatically fill in. Otherwise, we can click on Add, type in part of the CPT code or the part of the verbiage, and if the verbiage that we entered is applicable, then we would have this CPT or ICD-9 code show up for us. On cases that require laterality, a laterality field will pop up. If the surgeon has a preference card that's already associated to this procedure, the preference card will automatically fill in. For sites that do not have preference cards that are associated directly to the surgeons, we would recommend that you do go ahead and create these cards so that we don't have to look this item up and have the chance of having the wrong instrumentation or equipment available in the room. Estimated time will automatically fill in based off of the historical average of the surgeon. If not, then, or if the surgeon hasn't performed that case in our facility before, we would have to select a time. On the last screen, this is where we can flip between two normal functionalities. One is we can come in and say, okay, we'd like to put this in for the 27th of December. Select a spot to place this case in and then go ahead and schedule it. Otherwise, if we don't have the date and time specifically arranged, so we don't know where we want to put this patient yet, we just want to get him in here and get him on our backlog or waiting list, we would click on Add to Waiting List in the upper right corner just beneath the Done button. When you click this, it would then allow you to state the reason that we're doing it. And then clicking on Done would then put this patient on the waiting list instead of putting them into surgery itself. So then to schedule the patient off the waiting list, we would then click on the waiting list functionality. Find the patient, or find whatever patient it is that we wish to schedule. Click on schedule the case, and it takes us right back to the end of the scheduling process. Again, then we just simply select the room, select where we want to place the patient, any special instructions that we want to type in, we can type in special instructions, and then when we click done, the patient has now been added to the list for that day's surgery. The mini view of the OR schedule at the bottom of the screen can go forward up to 7 days to allow you to look at what's happening during the next week. And each of the items in here is a representation of the case and the amount of time the case is expected to run. The red vertical bar allows us to see what time it currently is. It automatically defaults to today, and we can see that we have all these cases. Room 1 is already finished, room 2 is finished, room 3, the first case is almost done, and there's a second case to go. So most likely what we would have done in management processes is we would have taken the second case from this room and moved it into either room 1 or room 2 to better utilize the space that we have available. To view an operating room schedule, either in the future or the past, you would just simply click on the calendar button to see the schedule for surgery. This then shows us the cases that the one that we just scheduled is in here, plus any other cases that are on for the day. The current schedule button is actually kind of high powered in that if you go in under reporting, under OR schedule, you can select which type of schedule you wish to print. By selecting the type of schedule that you want to print and printing that and showing that schedule, then the next time you go into the S3 main menu area and you select the schedule, it's going to print that layout of a schedule for you for that day. Of course, if you don't want to see that particular version of the schedule anymore, you just go into Reports, OR Schedules, select a different schedule type, select the day you want the schedule to run on, and the schedule will be there. One case in point is that a lot of folks have identified that case comments aren't showing up, room remarks aren't showing up, but they're showing up on other people's reports. That's because they've come in and checked these two check boxes. As long as these check boxes are checked, you'll see the comments for the rooms and the cases. Also, by clicking on Show Empty Rooms, it makes the schedule a whole lot larger, but it shows you all empty rooms that are on your OR schedule as well. All right, when you're in the pre-op mode, you can actually see all the patients that have been done in the past and need to have their documentation completed. You can see all the patients that are on today's schedule, and you can see patients that are out in the future. If you're logged on as a case scheduler and you're on this particular page, you can click on any functionality in here that you need to, or you can click on any patient, and by clicking on the patient, it on a current date, it brings you into the pre-op update page. In the pre-op update page, by clicking on the OR and case number, you can actually move this patient to another day if you need to move the patient to a different date. The schedule management folks can actually come in and move cases around from room to room and manage and maintain the service blocks that are assigned to the services. So if we're coming in and we have an empty room and now we're going to flip-flop the general surgery cases between two rooms, what we'll want to do is we'll want to remove, or in this case we have no service assigned in room 6 at all, we would want to create a second general surgery service block in here for half the time and take this general surgery block and reduce it to half the time and then flip the cases and then move the cases between the two rooms so that the service blocks maintain concurrency with the types of cases that are being done. Otherwise, if I have a surgical service that failed to show, say cardiothoracic surgery, and we're going to move the last case of the day for general surgery into this room so that we can complete the cases in a more timely fashion, we would leave the CT surgery service block in place, schedule the case into that room, and then when we run our reports later, it would show that general surgery used CT surgery time. However, the downside on that is that if general surgery's other two cases don't utilize all their time, then their scheduled time shows up as not being used in its entirety. Okay, back over to waiting list again. Waiting list allows us to view by a surgical service, or we can break it down individually by surgeon so that we can find patients that belong to a particular attending quicker so that we can schedule them off the waiting list. One thing to keep in mind, however, is that even if you don't break it down by surgeon, the surgeon's name is still listed in the last column, and by clicking on that column, we can sort in ascending or descending sequence. Once you have the patients in the waiting list, you would come into the waiting list, click on this. You can either schedule the patient, you can make changes. So if they're having an additional procedure or there's been a change in their status or something needs to be modified on the case, you can click on make changes and just change it. It will stay on the waiting list, but you're changing some of the data inside it. If the patient wound up being done as an emergency procedure or they determined that they didn't want to have the surgery performed after all, you can then remove them from the waiting list. Also, if the reason the patient was on a waiting list was because they had a surgeon preference, the surgeon's now available, but there's other items causing it to stay on the waiting list, you can then change the reason that the patient is on the waiting list. Okay. Now we'll do a quick run over a few of the reports that have been identified as being reports of interest. First report is the cancellations report. In the cancellations report, you'll notice that there's an include with a bunch of checkmarked areas in it. These are all reasons that have been pre-identified in S3 at your site. So this list will be different from hospital to hospital. That you can then turn on or turn off the various items or reasons that are being included. So by looking at May 2004, because I don't have any recent cancellations in my system, I can do a breakdown by service or breakdown by surgeon. And we picked the wrong day for that, didn't I? Yeah, this is actually a training system, and sometimes we can find the data that we've placed in it, and sometimes we can't. see, I'm going to actually cheat now. And I'm going to do a quick search for canceled cases. Which shows that my cancellations all occurred in of 08. Okay, so now if I go back to main, go back to reports, go back to cancellations, and we'll do March of 08. I wrote breakdown by service, breakdown by surgeon. Okay, so basically now what we have is we have a listing of all the reasons that in March of 2008 on why patients were canceled, what the cancellation rate is listed at the bottom. Down in the next section, because I told it to include breakdown by service, it lists the surgical services, how many cases were canceled by that service, how many cases were performed by that service, and what the cancellation statistics are on it. Also, across the top here is a numeric representation, and that's all the reasons, and so that it's a breakdown by reason. And then down at the bottom, of course, is the one breaking down by surgeon, so we can just see who's got the biggest hit. Next report is the block utilization report, or the service block time utilization. Service block time utilization, of course, is based off of the service blocks that are assigned and the utilization that's in the room. So basically the way the columns work in here is the assigned block time is all the blocks that were assigned to the surgical service. The use time assigned is the block time that was utilized by the surgical service in the block that was associated to them. Use time unassigned is all times that's been used by a surgical service against another surgical service's offered time. And then, of course, the utilization is a combination of both. If there is any data that is not being used because of missing information or whatever, the report will tell you that the information wasn't used. Also, by clicking on Show Source Data, if there was a date that had a problem, it would have a double back arrow with that there's a possible potential problem with a date or a time. You would then click on that, and it will give you the breakdown of what data was actually used for calculating that portion of the report. Okay, next report is the turnover time report. Caveat for the turnover time report in S3 is that turnover is wheels out to wheels in for sequentially scheduled cases belonging to the same surgical service. So if there is a flip between the two if there's a flip between surgical services, the cases will not be counted as a turnover. It will tell you how many turnovers were included and what the average turnover time was in minutes. The block time allocation report, also known as view room block schedule, is where you would actually go in to see, let's just go ahead and use the current. It actually will come in and show you which services are assigned to which rooms. If there's no service assigned on that day, it'll show that there's no service assigned, so that means the room is closed on that day. If the name is in bold, then that means that it's an assigned room, and this block will be tabulated and calculated in the service block time utilization report. However, if it is not bold, if it's in normal font, then it's not included in that report. Lastly, the room utilization report is basically the one that gives us the big view of what's happening overall in the operating room. We can break down by service or tell it to not break down by service. We can set the day shift start time as being 7 or whatever. The report automatically breaks the day down into 3 8-hour blocks. So if you're calculating or you're looking at a fiscal or calendar year or you're looking at a date range and you tell it to not break out the monthly data, it will just roll everything into one big calculation. Otherwise, it will break everything down by month. When you run the report as is without checking this box, then the room utilization statistic is calculated based off of room setup start to room cleanup end. Whereas when you click on calculate using patient in and out of room times, the report is then calculated with wheels in to wheels out, patient in room time versus staffed room time, as was discussed on the chart earlier. So by clicking OK, this gives us our raw data now that's based off of day shift. So if we look at day shift, we see that the average number of rooms staffed is 14. Thing to keep in mind is that the calculations here are all made off of the actual numbers. The average is just provided as an indicator on how many rooms you're averaging per shift, not how many we used for calculating the values. The values is actually the number of rooms that were scheduled or staffed for each day. The total available hours, that would be the number of staffed rooms times 8 hours. Used hours, utilization rate, that first group there in the gray area is for the entire operating room. And then the breakdown by surgical service falls underneath it, which shows its piece of the pie.
Hey, this is Major Welder. You should be able to see me. There's a few questions I just want to kind of get caught up with. And one is, what is the acronym PIRM? That's patient in room minutes. That's the number of minutes that's reported that you have a patient in the operating room. And there's a lot of questions about whether or not the start time of the day needs to be 07, 07:30. None of these metrics take into account your normal business day. However, your business rules at your facility will remain in effect whenever you start. That will be a command decision, and that will not be mandated by the 3SL director. So what I want to do is I want to share this with you, just so you will recognize that this is what the implementation manual is going to look like when it comes to you. And it is going to be broken down by chapters, and you will be able to go to the appendices, and this is where it's broken down by productivity, efficiency, or financial optimization. So as you roll into the appendices, you'll see the icons that will tell you where you're at and what area of the metric that we're covering. And that will continue on through all. Now, this document has not been through the final stages of one staff staffing and RMC staffing. That will be going out either this evening or tomorrow to the RMCs and to the one staff. We'll do a comprehensive staffing, received all the feedback from the RMCs, the MTFs, and we will update this document, and then we will push it out in its final form. Now, what I want to go over is service block utilization. I want to spend the rest of the time on this topic. As we met with MTFs, it became apparent that this concept was either misunderstood, mismanaged. Some were doing it well, some weren't doing it at all. And so I want to go over service block time. Now, you currently do not have this tool. But this tool we will be rolling out in SMS to all of the MTFs. Now, what this is showing is all of your subspecialties, from ortho all the way to organ transplant. What's important to understand about service block time is this is the time that's allocated to a surgical service. These inefficiencies decrease access to care, and Proper block time allocation and monitoring is the foundation for optimizing your utilization. Now there's some definitions that you need to understand. And the first one, I'm sure I'll get a lot of questions out, but lockout, block, release. So some facilities have a 24-hour, some facilities have a 72-hour block release, some have a 4-day. There's going to be a mandated 5 business day lockout release that's used in S3. And what this does is this allows other services to be able to fill those unscheduled times in your service block time, and that's the white space. So if you hear the term white space, that's what we're referring to. And we are recommending that there's a pager notification service that rolls out to all surgeons that there's open space or white space available on the schedule. This piece we need to be proactive with. Service block time, that's defined as dedicating time allocated in the OR to a predetermined service, and that will be based on service utilization and backlog, and I'll go over that with you in a minute with this graph. And then service utilization percentage, that's basically, this is what we're offering the surgeons, this is what they're using, that creates a percent, and that creates a service percent. So all individual surgeons for general surgery say create a service utilization percentage for their clinic or for their specialty. And then utilization threshold. And surgical services will be required to maintain a 75% service utilization percentage to maintain their allocated service block time. So let's go over this a little bit. It's very simple. You'll see here that this ortho case, this ortho group was offered 480 minutes. And what they did is they utilized 900 minutes. So how is this possible? Well, they used other people's block time, after hours, etc. What this block shows is they have 86 cases. This is 86 patients or cases that's on their wait list. So effective today, if you haven't done it, as the Tiger teams went through, we explained it, but all service or all backlog is to be placed into S3. The reason is if you don't know the backlog and they're keeping track of it with a green book in their clinic, then the person that's allocating service block time is absolutely blinded to critical information to be able to make an ongoing decision as to how to reallocate this time. So, so this particular case, ortho has 480 minutes. They used 900 minutes. They have an 86 case backlog. Okay, so let's look over here to the hand. So this, the hand surgeons were offered 1,200 minutes, and they only used 550, and they don't have a backlog. So you can very quickly see where you can take minutes from to reallocate to areas that can use additional minutes. This is a unique situation, so this is ophthalmology. Now we offered 846 minutes, yet they only used 260, but they have 72 cases waiting in the wings. So we're giving them time, they're not using the time. So now it will require the manager to go in and say, why exactly are they not using the time? Is it a booking issue? Are they scheduling their clinics the same time that they are scheduled in the operating room? But this creates a scenario that shouldn't happen because we shouldn't be generating a backlog and not using the time that we're offering. So this tool will be rolled out to all the MTFs, and it will be auto-populated off of S3 data, and we're working those automations as we speak, and then you will be able to very clearly at your facility see how to use your service block time. So a couple other changes to service block time. So one thing that we've been doing in our facilities that kind of goes against a good optimization principle for service block time that's well reported in the literature is we've been doing 4-hour block times. And that's where we're giving one service 4 hours of the operating room, and then we're flipping to a secondary service for another 4 hours. It's actually been shown that by doing that, it actually decreases your efficiencies and productivities and ultimately decreases access to care to your beneficiaries. So we're going to be recommending that 8 and 12-hour blocks are the minimums for block times within your operating room, and that should be the norm, and then 4-hour block times really should be the exception. And what we find is that's not the case. at most facilities. Most facilities are using these 4-hour block times, but you can see when you crunch the data how it affects their productivity and efficiency. So our recommendation is going to be 8-hour block times or 12-hour block times, and that those are blocked for a service, and that we don't do service switches in the middle of the day. The next thing is for those that are controlling the block time or managing the block time in your facility, use 75% service utilization to determine. So basically, if you have a service with greater than 75% service utilization and has a backlog, then you need to figure out how much time is needed to help them decrease their backlog. If they don't have a backlog and they're using greater than 75% of their time, then you've probably allocated them the right amount of service block time for that specific service. If the service has less than 75% utilization and has a backlog, well, that's when you need to start discussing with the chief of surgery how can we improve service utilization, or what are the factors that go into service utilization being low and the backlog continuing to grow. And if they're less than 75% utilization and they don't have a backlog, then you need to determine if you need to contract or shrink the service block time that you're allocating. And that would be an example for this hand surgeon. You know, is it just unusual? Are they on vacation? Is something happened that they're not using all this time that we historically gave them, or is this kind of where this 46% where they live, and we actually need to take this away and actually reallocate it to another service? So I'm going to stop there. We're going to roll all this out in detail to all of the facilities, and I will turn this back.
Thanks, Major Welder. So there are questions that continue to come into the Q&A pod, and they're very good questions, very appropriate. And Major Welder, you've answered a number of them already. What I'd like you to do is maybe pull out some of those that you'd like to speak to the group, and reiterate the responses that you've already given, just so you can speak to those responses in addition to sending them over the Q&A.
All right, so let's cover a couple of these. One question came in where the $1 billion annual cost came in, and Ms. Tracy Comer is our SME for our data analytics on that, and that's basically all of the cost. And when we look collectively across the AMED, what it costs to have a surgical service at every single MTF, and everything associated with that cost yields to $1 billion. A great question came in as to why is IRIS and the 3SL's OR performance metrics different. In fact, the IRIS refers to it as workload. The reason that is when the development of the IRIS metrics occurred, that occurred prior to the 3SL surgical service line even in existence. So the surgical service line stood up a month and a half ago officially. And when we looked at the metrics, we identified that we wanted to push everything into an 8-hour day. And we would be offsetting that 8-hour day for an efficiency metrics based on turnover times. The IRIS did not take turnover times into account. So with our metric, even the medicines will be pushed into an 8-hour day. However, the weighted and scaled balance of that metric will be offset by your turnover time. So if you want to be extremely efficient, you have high OR performance and you have low turnover times, and that yields a efficient facility. If you are a facility, because you can get over 100% OR performance. So, for instance, you're a large facility, you have a lot of after-hour cares, you have a lot of TSA cares, you can drive your OR performance to 120%. But if your average turnover times are 55 minutes, that is going to significantly reduce your balance score for efficiency. Let me look at a couple other questions here. Yes, I did mean to say January 2014, so in a couple weeks we'll be rolling this up. Setup time and turnover time still being counted against utilization. I just want to make this very clear. Operating room utilization, the metric that we have been measuring for years, surgical services, that is no more. That operating room utilization metric measures physical presence in the operating room. The reason we have revamped these metrics is because that metric alone does not paint the picture as to whether you're being productive, efficient, or financially sustainable. So we've taken the utilization, we've built it into the performance metric, but it's not the utilization metric as you currently are used to. So that we can just eliminate out of our minds because that metric will not be used from this day forward. Let me look at some of these other questions coming in. So somebody will put in a question that turnover times have to occur. I'm a CRNA. I'm completely aware that turnover times have to occur. The point is turnover times to be effective, and it's well stated in the literature, and it's a well accepted number in the civilian sector. 25 minutes is a good average turnover time. Now there has been great debate, and people have emotional feelings about, well, if you are a GME and you have a higher Casemix Index, sometimes those turnover time, and we understand that, and we're collectively looking at the enterprise as a whole, and 25 minutes is a good base line for turnover time. So we're aware they have to occur, and that is why when we weight and scale it, and you are a green go at 25 minutes or less, and you are 120% OR performance, you will be extremely well rewarded on your metric because you will be a highly efficient facility. Okay, let's talk about how we're going to account for all this work that goes on outside the operating room. And I will tell you, we're at a fire engine pace standing up the surgical service line, and I am very well aware that anesthesia does a lot of work, nurses, techs do work, surgeons do work outside the operating room. We have not, at this point, developed a metric to capture the workload that is being done, and I'm being completely transparent that we are evaluating this. We absolutely understand a lot of work is done. We're taking that into consideration with staffing models, but as of right now, we do not have a way to display all the work that is being done outside the operating room. And I'm sorry for the pauses. I'm just reading these as they come in. So a statement was made that multiple smaller cases will generate multiple turnover times. You're absolutely correct. As same-day surgery clinics or facilities on the outside, rapid turnover rates, they become very efficient with their turnover time process. And as you generate more cases, you get credit through your workload and caseload metric, because whether you are an academic facility, non-academic facility, inpatient versus outpatient, those metrics will be tweaked accordingly. And as we move into the second phase of the metrics, considering Casemix Index and how that relates to readiness, we absolutely understand that. Yeah, so a good question came in, and it relates directly to Casemix Index, and it's basically said, can we look at the different types of cases that we're doing versus the total number? And so basically, whether we're doing hearts or whether we're doing PE tubes. And we have a task force right now that's actually looking at Casemix Index and how that affects readiness to provide combat casualty care. So those cases and Casemix Index are being evaluated and are taken into consideration. And as we continually refine and develop the surgical services service line, we will be incorporating that, because we have other tools that we're developing, and this is really kind of the preview of what we are doing, and a lot of work is going on behind the scenes. But we're looking at tools right now for how we determine capacity, how we determine capability, how we allocate staffing against that capacity and capability. At what Casemix Index do we need to maintain our wartime mission? There's a lot of tools that are being developed, and I ask that one, we get excited about this because it's a great initiative, but two, we have to understand that a lot of work has to be done. This is not something that I'm willing just to roll out and then try to do the damage later. I really want, as we roll out these tools, for them to be polished tools, so we're not spending our time afterwards trying to figure out why exactly we rolled out a tool that gave a 40% answer. So the question was on RVUs and caseload. So when we look at productivity, caseload is simply the cases that are done per OR per year. That's divided by months. And then over your staffed operating room. So a tasker has already been sent out to the regions to get with the MTFs. You may have 28 physical operating rooms, but you may only use or staff 24 operating rooms. Now I will tell you that whatever you guys negotiate back is your number of operating rooms that you staff against according to your workload. We will be fixing that denominator. So in S3 you won't be able to roll your denominator up and down based on the daily staffing of your operating rooms. The RMCs have been directed to identify the number of staffed operating rooms for the metric. Now let me repeat, not physical operating rooms, but what you staff for, and then that will become a fixed denominator for the metric. So are all the tweaks outlined in the 3SL user guide? I will tell you, the implementation manual is 100 pages, and it's not 100 pages of mind-numbing reading. It actually has some very succinct information. And then the operations manual will be a little bit more comprehensive, that are the nuts and bolts. But we will continue to redevelop and redefine, but yes, it is an excellent comprehensive product. So a question came in, is how is the bonus incentive actually calculated? So let me address that. Now I want to preface this with Lieutenant Colonel Robert Davis, and PA&E is the expert that developed this, but I will articulate it. It's very simple math. There's no trickery to it. It's your patient in-room minutes over a 24-hour period, and for a MEDAC, that is put into an 8-hour normal business day. For a MedSyn, that's put into a 10-hour normal business day. If you achieve 80% OR performance for the IRIS metric, every minute for patient in-room minutes above that 80% will yield $1. So it's $1 per minute as long as you maintain above 80%. And it's a 24-hour collection of all the work that you do that's embedded into an 8-hour day for MedX and 10-hour day for MedSyn. Okay, so there was a question on how do we calculate 24/7 and patient in-room minutes. Everything is converted to minutes when you do this mathematical calculation. Okay, there's a question about recapture. So let's talk a little bit about recapture. So our recapture rate metric looks at if you're performing at 80%, and that's what it's, not if you're performing, the metric is based on 80% OR performance. So when we look at capacity, we look at your number of facilities and an 80% OR performance within those number of operating rooms. So if you have 4 operating rooms, we look at 80% of 4 operating rooms over an 8-hour day. Now, the way the recapture rate works is we also have to look at, is it within your capability? So our P&E analysts go back. If a procedure has been done 4 times at your facility, it is determined that that is within the capability of your facility. So recapture rate then it's presented as a percent and a number. The reason we did that is a percent really is not actionable. A number will tell you the number of cases that you leaked from your facility that were within the capacity and capability of your facility to obtain. Now, we are giving guidance within the implementation manual of how to manage your templates, how to manage your filters at M2. We're given guidance of how the ROFR process works, how the referral process works. We're developing quick reference guides for primary care to decrease the number of non-quality referrals that are going to the surgical clinics, that are flooding the surgical clinics and taking up the time of the surgeons, which prevent them from getting into the operating room. So we've taken a comprehensive approach on this. The goal is absolutely to recapture everything that you are leaking that's within your capacity and capability. And the ultimate goal is to right-size your facility so you have the adequate resources, the number of physical space that you need, the staffing that you need to be able to adequately serve your patient population that's in your specific geographical location. So a lot of questions are coming in whether we're going to mandate that you start at 0.7. That has not been discussed at this level at all, and I think that will depend on exactly how your dynamics at your individual locations, whether you're GME, non-GME, and so as far as that question, there has been no discussion at this level at mandating any start or stop times. What you do need to understand is start and stop times do not, are currently not engaged in any of the metrics that we use. So there's a question about the turnover time reports doesn't exclude non-sequential cases from different services. Should it be same service, same surgeon? You know, in a perfect world, and the revenues-based model, they absolutely book 8-hour days. That is why the recommendation is going out that you have 8- and 10-hour block times, not 4-hour block times with different services. The switching surgeons throughout the day within the same service actually has not been reported as an inefficiency. So our recommendations are 8 hours. The turnover time should be within that service in 8 hours. 4 hours should be the exception. But yes, we do understand that when there are multi-services, multi-surgeons, that could potentially have an impact on your turnover time. Okay, so will SMS be populated at the OTSG level or at the MTF level? And SMS is populated at all levels. And what I mean by that is you have the ability to see it at the local level. Anyone with a CAC access card can get into SMS and review data, and there's 700,000 metrics in SMS if you want to look at them all. But if you search surgical services, you'll see a line that says surgical services service line, and you click on that and the first screen that'll come up. Now, I know a bunch of you are going to jump on there and start looking at it, so here's my disclaimer. We are currently actively building this site. The balance and scale for these metrics, when you look at the MedCom overview, has them equally balanced as 1:6 because we're actively programming the system. So don't get excited when you see the numbers, because we're still doing it in the background. It's just an open site, so you will be able to get access to it and see what we're actually doing. What I ask you is, in January 15th, we're going to be rolling out the first iteration. So if you want to get on there and kind of play around and see what it's going to look like, great. Just don't send me 1,000 emails asking about your numbers, because I'm very well aware of how the balances and scales have gone with the numbers right now, and I know the stage that we're at in building the program. I just want to put it out there so you start getting used to looking at that site. Okay, so another question came in about the RVUs. So I talked about caseload. Let me talk a little bit about workload. So workload is capturing A and B RVUs. So we're really taking a comparative look at what the surgeons are doing. So really that caseload metric is looking at surgeon productivity. That is not looking at anesthesia productivity. That is not looking at nursing productivity. It's saying how productive Army surgeons are relative to how productive they should be based on historical Army surgical productivity. So when you look at the workload, that's really capturing the inpatient and outpatient workload of the surgeons at your facility. It's not capturing the workload of anesthesia nurses or techs. So again, I'm very well aware of a lot of work that goes on, and a lot of work that anesthesia is doing that's not being captured, the nurses and the techs. I'm aware of that. This is our first iteration rollout, and we will be continually re-updating as we go to make sure that we build platforms that can capture that information. Okay, so the old switcheroo question has come up. So can I flip-flop rooms? Again, you're going to be staffed against your patient population, your workload, your caseload, your efficiencies, your financial optimization, the staffing models, etc. Some facilities may only have a patient population that yields enough work to do 5 operating rooms. So then they say, well, can we use 4 operating rooms and then flip-flop out of the 5th operating room? Well, what I can tell you is you can use your space how you want to use your space, and the most efficient way is we are capturing 24-hour OR performance. Where that comes into play is how you're staffed. So, you know, the intent is not to staff you for additional rooms that you don't have workload for in order to get through your cases in a quicker manner to be done at 1 o'clock. The intent is, you know, we're providing you some tools to help you be successful with surgical services. How you use those tools are really going to be up to you. We're going to do centralized education, meaning there's going to be a little bit different of a rollout structure where we're going to have a 3SL staff at every single facility, and we will have an OR director at every single facility. Now, the 3SL director, program managing director is the title, 3SL PMD, program managing director. They will be responsible for the surgical clinics, the operating room, the PACU, the phase 2, and I don't want to get into a big long discussion because it'll generate a ton of questions, but they're looking at the business aspect of running surgical services. So that is going to be the program managing director's job, is really all of these nuts and bolts business attributes that go into the metrics and help the smoothing throughout the entire surgical services process. The OR services director is really going to be the one that's responsible. Now, we're currently developing about 24 tools. I rolled out the first one, which is the service block time. These are tools that they're going to be able to use to help efficiently manage the operating room and make sure that we provide an environment that is efficient and productive, and we can get the most access to care, surgical care for our beneficiaries. Now, we're going to bring those directors in to do comprehensive training, and we're going to do refresher training. We want everybody to be doing this at the operating company approach, where everything becomes standardized, and whether you're at SAMC or whether you're at Martin, the understanding of the business aspects and the throughput and the consistent patient experience is consistent throughout all of our organizations. Okay, so the question is, who is managing SMS? So we're building auto platforms for data management. We pull our data from EAS4, M2, Dimmer's Eye, and S3. So we have folks here that are managing the SMS site. As we build and grow the service line, they will be embedded directly with the 3SL. But currently, the strap management folks, Lean Six Sigma folks, have taken that initiative, and they are working with PA&E to make sure that is accurate. Now, that being said, that brings up another very important concept, and that concept is Dimmer's Eye. It will become critical that you accurately report your Dimmer's Eye, and one of our annexes will be a detailed annex to tell you exactly how to do this, because FTEs, available FTEs, and staffing numbers come directly out of Dimmer's Eye that go into these metrics. So it will be important that you accurately reflect what you're doing at your facility. So if you're a facility that the NCOIC is putting straight 8s across all of your staff members 5 days a week, 40 hours a week, and that's the report that's going up, that is your data. I am not manipulating the data up here. I'm taking it in as it comes from raw data, and it's your data. So if it's incorrectly reported, it's going to affect the metrics that are rolled out. So one of the annexes within the implementation manual is stating just that. It's very important that you accurately report your data into Dimmer's Eye. And Major Buckley, that what I just stated is exactly that answers your question. So when those surgeons are at your facility and the FTEs that are reported against your facility for those metrics, you need to make sure that those surgeons are accurately reporting their time within Dimmer's Eye. So 8 hours is not being counted against you, and then they're actually at another facility working those 8 hours. So none of the metrics in SMS will be loaded from the MTF level. Absolutely everything that's inputted into SMS will be done at the OTSG level. So there's a question of, did I hear him correctly? Are we going to be able to change the number of staffed rooms? What I am saying is a tasker went out to the RMCs, and it had 2 columns. It says, what is your physical OR space? Meaning, do you have 28? Do you have 5? Do you have 3? The very next column says, what is your staffing for your operating room? So basically, what's the number of operating rooms that you are adequately staffed at for the patient population that you have based on staffing models? So those 2 numbers went out. The numbers that we are using in the metric and the denominator is the staffed number of operating rooms, not the physical number of operating rooms. So I hope that clears that up. Nurse case times are not in any of the metrics at all. Now, I know that they are using those in some of the staffing models currently, but as far as our metrics in 3SL, nursing case times are not applicable. Is the 4 times performed at the MTF the number of procedures to determine capability on a rolling 12? And the answer to that is yes. So when we're going to move out with a 24-hour capture of OR performance, the 3SL metric will be 15 January. Now, here's a big disclaimer for that. So general line on this next radar brief. So as the Tiger team went through the last 7 months, and I was on every one of the calls with them, we gave some quick win, we gave some early recommendations. Some of it's consistent with what that I have said. Some of it is about URSA agreements. Some of it was recommendations to the command to support the surgeons, to support to eliminate risk adversity within the facility. A lot of recommendations went out. As we move through all of the facilities, general line on this next radar in February, he wants to look at OR utilization turnover times as we originally reported it, and he wants to look at all of the new metrics. This is going to be a one-time shot comparative analysis for him to see and say, this is how the new metrics paint a picture of a facility, this is what the old metrics said, and then he wants to see, based on the 7 months that we've been spending with these MTFs, if there's been any improvements, and then from that radar forward, we're going to have a new baseline. The new baseline is going to be those 6 metrics, and you know, what I want to kind of prep everybody for is some facilities are not going to look very good with these new metrics, and that is completely okay. The intent of this service line is to provide you the tools and the resources that you need for you to be successful. I've said that from the very beginning, that my goal is to produce metrics and to produce annexes and to roll out a service line that's MTF friendly and that provides the tools that they need, because we genuinely want you to be successful. So we understand that some facilities have a 32-cent on the dollar return on investment. None of these numbers are a secret to the GO level up here. I've been briefing all levels. However, it's going to generate a new baseline, and it will give you the areas that you need to focus on and spend your efforts, and the areas that you're doing well on and you need to maintain. So we understand what the metrics are going to show. We understand how they're going to affect the overall performance. The GOs are already prepped for exactly how those look at each facility, and as we move through, we will be spending time and doing a traveling roadshow to your facility to help work through some of these kinks so we can increase the productivity, we can increase your efficiencies, we can get a more positive return on your investment, and we can maintain the quality. Now let me address that real quick, because a couple questions have come in on how we're going to measure quality. So QMD, Colonel Grace and Colonel Kessling's shop at MedCom, they own all of the quality data. I work with them on a weekly basis to discuss quality indicators, and they will be maintaining the quality data, and we will be maintaining the metric data. Let me take just a couple more of these. Okay, a lot of people are concerned about the turnover time, and here's what I say about that. So yes, 25 minutes is the goal. Yes, I understand there are unique situations that people cannot maintain 25 minutes. The turnover times, if you are not reducing your turnover times to a point where you can add a case on to the end of the day, I mean, that's really the importance of this. This whole model is access to care. It's not a business model. It's not a revenues-based model. It's an access to care model. So the end-state goal is to do as much direct care that we can do at our facilities and minimize the amount of purchase care that goes out that's within our capacity and capability. So turnover times, the goal of turnover times, yes, 25 minutes is the metric mark, but you should be striving to reduce that time and become efficient enough that you can start adding more cases to your operating room, because you become more efficient. As you become more efficient and you have more time and space and you adequately adjust your service block time to adequately and accurately reflect what's going on, you will be able to get a higher caseload from the surgeons into the operating room. Now, we understand that primary care feeds surgical services. We understand that there is a referral issue. About 90% of the cases that go to the surgical clinic do not yield a surgical case. We're developing a surgical yield metric that we haven't rolled out, so we can say this is the number of cases that went to the surgical clinic that were non-quality referrals that should not have been sent there. And so we're tightening our shot group, not just in surgical services, but we're looking across the spectrum to make sure that we're efficient and productive in all arenas. Okay, so renovations question came out. So I know a lot of facilities are renovating their operating room, and they by no you know, they can't control that they have staff for 4 operating rooms and one is physically shut down for 6 months, and they're not going to PCS that staff. And so the question is this going to be counted against you? And what I'm going to take back to the PCI director is that we have those continual negotiations. Surgical service line, and the way that I've written the organizational chart is there's going to be direct communication to the OTSG level from the service line program managing directors. And the reason for that is so these kind of conversations can exist, and so we can provide real-time support, and we can readjust fire in a real-time atmosphere to ensure that what we are providing, the MTFs, the resources, the recommendations that they need in order to be successful. So that's one of the ways we're going to account for that, and that's going to be on a case-by-case basis. But I do understand that there are times and there's going to be situations that's beyond your control, and these metrics aren't to be a big brother approach, and these metrics are designed so you can use them, and then you can manipulate and do performance improvement processes in specific areas to better your MTF. And where one facility may need to work on productivity, the other may need to work on efficiency. One may have a recapture problem. So it's going to be unique metrics to each individual facility, and the annexes aren't the end-all be-all. And we
Thanks, Major Welder, for answering all of those questions. That might just be a record for number of questions that have come in. Thank you for answering all of them and so thoroughly. And I can email the list of questions to you that came in over the pod, and we can talk through how you want to handle the remaining questions and writing up the answers to the questions that we didn't get a typed response to. Thank you to Howard Dady for presenting today. I know he is under the weather and made an exception to be able to present to the group today so that we didn't have to cancel. So we certainly appreciate his efforts in presenting to our large group. A couple admin notes. Please, if you haven't already, you may download the files from the file share pod for reference. The final file in the file share pod is the certificate of attendance. Please download that. And when you open the PDF file, there's a button to submit the completed form that lets us know you were here, and then you can save the file for your files for attendance. The next Aspire series is going to be on 9 January. Ms. Dee Garza, Ms. Brenda Elliott, and Lieutenant Colonel Mike Richards are going to present about concept plans that have been a hot topic, at least around here at OTSG, and we know it's some MTFs too. So you can learn the hows and whys of creating concept plans on 9 January at 1300 Eastern, and it'll be this same DCO room. Thank you all for joining us so close to the holidays. That's all we have today. Have a great holiday season, and we hope to see you in January for concept plans. Thanks, everyone.